What's going on, everybody? Jhow here, and in this Diablo 3 Wizard video, we're going to talk about the best build going into Season 22. Now, I will say this, I already put out a video on the Typhon's Veil, so if you want to try that build instead, this is a lawn build, a Legacy of Nightmares, so it's going to be a little more difficult to gear for. So if you want to have something to play before that, check out the video down. The link is in the description. But let's get into the skills, the gear, and everything you need to know for this build going into Season 22. So this will be a Frozen Orb build, and it means that you're going to be doing a lot. There's going to be a lot of synergy in your gear and a very meticulous play style. Spectral Blade with Barrier Blades to make sure and get those shields up. This is going to be cast very fast with your belt that you're going to have. We'll get into that in a minute, but getting those shields up is the name of the game. This is also going to help you get that arcane power back so you can spam your abilities a little faster. Arcane Torrent with Flame Ward. This says you take 15% less damage from attacks while channeling. Every second you channel increases this. Now, you're not going to necessarily channel this in the conventional way of making sure that you're going around and holding down the Arcane Torrent. What this does now, and we'll get into the gear in a minute, but I think it's important to note right now, the reason for this is the Death Wish. While channeling Arcane Torrent or one of the other abilities, all damage is increased by up to 325%. That's going to be in your cube, so that will be a maximum of 325 unless you find a really good one to wear instead, because the weapon will be 3 weapons going with the cube. We'll get into that shortly. The other element of that is also the Mantle of Channeling. They've changed these, and the tooltips might not reflect it, but in the patch notes it was reflected in the Mantle of Channeling. You no longer have to cast for a duration. It's simply activating this to make sure that you get the damage bonus of this or the channeling bonus for the Death Wish, for the Mantle of Channeling, so that you instantly proc it. And with that, that's when you're going to use the Arcane Orb, which we'll talk about now. Because the Arcane Orb says that the minute you get that, because the orb takes 1 second to go out. So what you can do is you can channel and then cast orb and or one or the other. Basically, you're going to be alternating it so that your Arcane Orb is getting the benefit of the Death Wish and the Mantle of Channeling while hitting that Arcane Torrent. You don't have to click and hold or press and hold. You just have to channel it for a split second and then get that out. And so you're going to find that you're going to be pressing Arcane Torrent, Arcane Orb a lot, and then keeping your Spectral Blades with the shields on there, as well as some gear that we'll talk about as well. Teleport with Safe Passage, just take less damage. This allows you to reposition, get into position for better orb angles, also to get into those Oculus circles that are coming from your Templar. There's a lot you can do there. Storm Armor with Shocking Aspect. This should be no surprise here. You're going to be going into gear and with the cube, the Halo of Carini, to make sure and take less damage from this, to make sure you get that less damage absorbed so that your shields are the name of the game. And then Magic Weapon with Deflection. When you perform an attack, gain a protective shield for 3 seconds that absorbs 4% of your life and damage. Less damage taken, more shields. Spectral Blades with fast attacks. Yeah, you can see how this is good, but you also get the bonus damage on this as well. For the passive skills, Power Hungry, you deal 30% additional damage to enemies further than 30 yards away. You're going to be casting Arcane Orb at max range or trying to get max range to get that explosion at the end. So Arcane Torrent and Arcane Orb, you're alternating those to get the buff from the Death Wish. You're getting it at max range. You're getting the explosion at the end of it, which we'll talk about here again in a minute. But Elemental Exposure, damaging enemies with Arcane Cold, Fire, or Lightning will cause them to take 5% more damage from your attacks. Arcane Torrent, Flame Ward, you're going to be mixing up some of this, so you're getting bonus damage there. Illusionist to pair with your Teleport for more repositioning. This is vital to make sure that you get at max range or you get to a better position, or that you can walk in, use your Spectral Blades, pull a bunch of stuff, aggro it all into one giant ball, and then reposition accordingly as you go through there. And then Galvanizing Ward, as long as you have not taken damage in the last 5 seconds, that means your shields are making sure that you don't take that health damage. You gain a protective shield that absorbs the next 60% of your life and damage. So it's shields on shields on shields. All right, so let's talk about the weapons first, because there's 3 weapons that are all in conversation here. 2 of them will be in the cube because that's the buff from Season 22. 1 of them you will be wearing. It doesn't matter which one you're wearing so much as you're getting the highest damage from it. And the highest damage could also mean the secondary. First, let's talk about the Unstable Scepter. The damage of Arcane Orb is increased by 350 to 450%, and its explosion triggers an additional time. So getting that channel and making sure that you're getting the max range on the orb, yes, it'll do damage in between, but getting that explosion at the end gives it that extra explosion, gives you that bonus damage. And that's going to help you do a lot more damage with this beefed up. The other one, Wizard Spike. Performing an attack has a 25% chance to hurl a frozen orb. Arcane Orb does up to 350% increased damage. You could easily wear this or have this in the cube. It's all about getting that secondary damage and getting that going. Arcane Torrent also means that you'll be getting some extra orb cast, as well as your Spectral Blades. Manually casting Arcane Orb is still going to be a lot of where that damage is going to come from. And lastly, as we already mentioned, the Death Wish. While channeling Arcane Torrent, it says for at least 1 second, but you don't need to do that 1 second. The tooltip is a little off. I don't see this changing going into live, but make sure and keep an eye on the comments below after the season starts. But Death Wish says that you will get a bonus 325% damage if this is in your cube. So getting these 3 weapons by way of wearing 1 and 2 in the cube and wearing whichever one gives you the most damage is where you're going to find the trio come together, where channeling gives you bonus damage, using an attack, and because you're attacking fast, will give you more damage, more orbs out, and then also Arcane Orb doing bonus damage, and then Arcane Orb doing bonus damage with Unstable Scepter. You can see the synergy here to make sure that you're getting a ton of damage out just by way of that extra cube slot and getting all 3 of these combined. We'll look at the offhand with the Triumvirate. Your signature spells increase the damage of Arcane Orb from 300 to 400% for 6 seconds, stacking up to 3 times. Because you're going to have the Shame of Delzir equipped, this means that your signature spells attack faster. Going back, that is Spectral Blade, so you get shields faster, you get Arcane Power back faster, and more importantly, you get to these stacks. Keeping these 3 stacks up is the name of the game. This is pretty easy because you attack so fast. You're going to be cycling your signature spell through with your Spectral Blades, so you get the bonus damage from this, stacking up to 3 times. This is really easy to keep up. You want to have 100% uptime on this because it's that easy to have. Plus, so you get that Arcane Orb damage. You can see Arcane Orb damage is in abundance just between your main hand and your offhand. When it comes to some of your other gear, the Frostburn Gloves Cold Skills deal up to 20% increased damage and have a 50% chance to freeze enemies. Arcane Orb, it's cold, it's going to do a lot of damage. Of course you're going with that. So Frostburn on your glove. We already mentioned this briefly in the skills section, but we'll touch on it again. The Mantle of Channeling. This was changed this season to where you don't have to channel for a period of time. It works the same way, where the minute you start channeling, the very split second, you're going to get the bonus damage from this, making it a very strong piece of gear to have. So you're just getting that extra channel, getting that bonus damage, and Mantle of Channeling fits into the Legacy of Nightmare set pretty easily as a result. For your helmet, a lot of people like Andariel's Visage, and for what it's worth, you can kind of put anything here, but Andariel's Visage gives you more stat potential to be able to get more stats. You're not worried about cooldown reduction. You're not worried about having bonus life. So the socket and the gems don't really matter on your helmet. It's just about getting stats, more and more stats. The secondary on this is kind of meh, but it's all about getting more primary stats available, which is why Andariel's Visage is normally the go-to for your lawn builds. There are some other options, but we'll focus on Andariel's Visage for now. For your chest piece, the Aquila Cuirass, while above 90% primary resource, all damage taken is reduced by 50%. Now, you're not always going to be above 90% resource, but you're going to be there quite often, and so getting the extra procs from this is really nothing better for the Cuirass to make sure and have this as the chest piece, and you can throw those intelligence gems on there. Intelligence gems, more damage plus more resistances because you're a mage. When it comes to the pants, this might be harder going into season because you do ideally want the Swampland Waders. That gives you the extra cold % damage, and it's something that is a Witch Doctor item, so it's a little more harder to obtain, but that is the one that you want to go for. So if you have some friends that can power level, you can craft those, and then you can roll those and then give those over to your wizard. So you do have to find a way to get those. If not, there's really anything can go here, but you want to, for the end game, get those Swampland Waders. So getting that and getting an Ancient pair is the name of the game for the end game. Next up, your Ice Climbers for your boots. Gain immunity to freeze and immobilize effects, But also, you can get a lot of stats on this to make sure that you get that bonus damage. So you can roll Arcane Orb damage on your boots, and that way you can get that bonus damage, getting these Ancient so that it pairs well with your Legendary Gem, making sure to get those stats out. As far as your gear goes, area damage is really good, and armor is good on your shoulders. Area damage and crit chance, crit damage, and intelligence on your gloves is just fine. As far as your weapons go, area damage, again, is the name of the game for this one as well. Area damage, area damage, area damage, and then crit are going to be a lot of the abilities that you're going to be looking for. And the same can be said for your bracers, cold damage and crit. On the Ashnagar's Blood Bracer, this increases the potency of your shields by 100%, and we already hammered on about that. So shields, and more shields are going to be really important as a result. Also, Squirt's Necklace, a very common one for the wizard because of the shields. Cold, crit, socket. It's the name of the game. Socket the most important here, and then crit chance, crit damage, and cold skills are all going to be the ideal option. It's going to be hard to get all of that, but Squirt's Necklace, because you're not actually taking damage and it's all absorbed by your shields, this is going to increase your damage by a pretty big margin. And when it comes to your rings, if you are solo queue, a Unity is what you're going to use on one slot. The Unity, make sure you put the other one on your Templar that cannot die, or your follower to make sure they cannot die, and that way you can get and share that damage and have more survivability as a result. Convention of Elements is your other ring to make sure and get that crit chance, crit damage, socket, and just damage on this is okay, and you can get that bonus damage. Getting that increased damage, you can keep an eye out for that, so when all of your abilities are going through, you can hit that and get some super damage coming out with this setup. Now, when it comes to Kanai's cube, we've already mentioned there's 3 weapons, 2 of them going in the cube. We're not going to go over that again. For your armor slot, Stone Gauntlets. Getting hit increases your armor by 50%, but reduces your movement speed and attack speed by 20%. This is not a big deal. Stone Gauntlets is going to be more than okay to make sure and increase your toughness. Also, the Halo of Karini. Now, if you have a really good Halo of Karini, or you have a better roll on this, or it's a Primal or an Ancient, and pairs well with the Legacy of Nightmares set, by all means, wear this and put the Unity or the Convention in your cube. It doesn't really matter which one is in your cube, so long as you're getting the most stats out of the ones that you're wearing, and the other, whichever of the 3, goes into the cube. And so that's going to be it. 2 weapons in the cube, Stone Gauntlets, Halo of Karini, or cycle out one of the other ones. And so you can play around that. Same thing for the Stone Gauntlets. If you don't have an Ancient Frostburns, or you have a really well-rolled Stone Gauntlets, you can just swap places there. The secondary is going to be rolled on there to get that bonus increased damage for cold skills for the Frostburn to make that worthwhile. Legendary Gems, I already mentioned it. The Legacy of Dreams, to make sure that you get that lawn build going here so that you can get the bonus damage. And so Legacy of Dreams says that, hey, you know what? I don't have any sets, so we're going to get some bonus damage. And that's the name of the game. And then also for the Bane of the Trapped, you're going to be having slow and cold and slow and cold, so you might as well go with that. And then, of course, the Bane of the Stricken for greater rifts. If you are playing regular rifts, you could just go Bane of the Powerful, make for faster, more efficient clears. But Bane of the Stricken, if you're pushing greater rifts, you need to have this on there to make sure and get that extra damage on those bosses and those Rift Guardians to make sure that you're doing that bonus damage. And of course, the higher the level, the more you've got to hit them. And so everything going on there. So that's the build. It's a little bit difficult to gear for because you need so many different pieces, and you need the Legacy of Dreams. You need all the items potentially ancient. That's really going to increase your damage. And so you need to have a lot of gear for this. It's very rewarding. It's not hard to get over time. It's a little easier than some of the other builds that we might have talked about recently, but overall, the Wizard build going into Season 22, this is, on the PTR, the best build and will likely be the best build. Typhon's Veil not far behind it, so if you prefer a slightly different playstyle or a Hydra build, you can check that out. But right now, the Arcane Orb with the Cold Orb going out, the Frozen Orb, is going to be the biggest damage that you could possibly put out there. With the changes to the Death Wish and the Mantle of Channeling, it makes things a lot easier to just kind of proc and cast over and over, making this super strong going into Season 22. So that's going to do it for this Diablo 3 Wizard build going into Season 22. If you liked the video, feel free to hit that like button below or leave a comment letting me know what you're running here going into Season 22 and whether that 4th slot really changes the game for you going forward. Also, make sure to subscribe for more Diablo content, other gaming content as well. Be greatly appreciated. As always, thank you all so much for watching. As always, happy hunting. See you again.